Welcome to episode 150 of the Sports Geek podcast. On this week's episode, I chat with South Sydney Rabbitohs CEO Blake Solly.
Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, who is a sports geek like Mark Cuban. He just has a few more dollars, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek, and you are listening to the 150th episode of the Sports Geek podcast. I must admit, when I started doing this, recutting my radio spots on ABC Grandstand and Halftime, I did not think I would get to 150, but what I found is this is my platform. I found my place, and thank you to you for listening. You're either doing it on the Sports Geek website, sportsgeekhq.com, or you're doing it on your favourite podcast platform, whether it be iTunes, my favourite Pocket Casts. And if you have, you've left a review. Thank you. Looked over the stats. For 150, I went and checked Libsyn. Libsyn is, for those who occasionally do get asked, how do you set up a podcast? What do you do? I've been using Libsyn the whole time as my podcast host, primarily because it gives me some really great stats. At the time of recording, we are at 198,795 downloads. 198,795 downloads. And luckily enough, we've been added some technology for this special episode. And you know what it is? You are the 200,000th downloader. So thank you very much for you for listening to this episode. So hopefully you've got a little bit more strut in your step to work today, knowing that you are the 200,000th. It's very hard to say. Downloader of the Sports Geek podcast. Thank you very much for listening. It's no point doing a podcast if no one's listening. So to have 200,000 downloads is absolutely amazing. And the thing is with stats are wonderful. Our average length for the podcast has been around 50 minutes. So that totals up to 10 million downloaded minutes, which is 166,000 hours podcasting, or nearly 700 days, or nearly 19 years. So 19 years of podcasting content is out there on the internet. Thank you very much for supporting the podcast. Thank you if you're one of the people who left the iTunes reviews. 113 so far. I hope there's a rush of reviews if you've listened to it even recently or way back from episode 1. If you've left a review, I know how painful iTunes make it, so I do appreciate the effort that you make. And also a special shout out and a thank you to all the guests that have been on the podcast up until this time. Over 160 now and counting, from sports all around the world, both here in Australia, in the US, Canada and North America as well, and then also in the UK and Europe, that have been guests on the show and been very open and sharing to share their knowledge. And it's the only reason the podcast works. It's the only reason I think that everyone tunes in to listen to it. So thank you very much to my guests, but also I can't do my thank yous without thanking the team around me that helps me put it out and helps me continue to put out. Thanks to Meg, who helps with booking of guests and pulling together the graphics and then the show notes and making sure that I do a podcast every week, and I do it around my crazy schedule at times. Thanks to James, who has been a lifesaver from an editing point of view. Just when I started recording this intro, I can't remember the last time I had to edit a podcast, and that's a good thing. I think I edited 200 odd podcasts, both here, Sports Geek and Beers Blokes. And James, you're a lifesaver, so thank you very much. Also thanks to Jolly, who's also producing a stack of content around the podcast, lifting up my Instagram game, finding nuggets of great quotes from both me and my guests and sharing them. So very much thank you to the Sports Geek team behind the scenes, making sure you find out about it and more people find out about it. But now I want to get into the actual show. And today's guest is the start of a new interview series, a bit of a sub-series of the Sports Geek podcast, where I'll be interviewing sports CEOs and sort of getting their perspective of both what I do and the space that potentially you listen to in the digital and marketing and technology and CRM space, but also seeing what that is like and how that landscape has changed for CEOs and what they're looking for. And so I was really looking for someone to talk to, and Blake Solly from the South Sydney Rabbitohs definitely came to mind. He's been at the Rabbitohs for a short time, but making a big impact, and has a real data focus on the business side of sport. So I hope you do enjoy the chat that I had with Blake as much as I did in having it. So here is Blake Solly, CEO of the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Very happy to be here at the headquarters of the Rabbitohs in Redfern with CEO of the South Sydney Rabbitohs, Blake Solly. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Sean.
So you are now 13 months, or roughly about that, into the role at South Sydney Rabbitohs. Is there something that the present Blake would tell Blake turning up on his first day on the job?
Probably that all of the expectations that I had for life in clubland, having been in a governing body, were absolutely true, and that it would be more of a roller coaster week in, week out, but that also it's probably a little bit more fun because you're on that roller coaster, and a win makes everything so much sweeter, and a loss, as difficult as it is to deal with, you're never more than 7 days away from another game and a chance to put it right. So,
yeah, you mentioned there your background. You came to the Rabbitohs from the UK. Do you want to give people a little bit of your background in sports business, how you got to this position?
Yeah, so I was a qualified solicitor working in Sydney and decided to go on a working holiday to the UK in 2005, and I was going to do 2 years working in the north of the UK and play a bit of footy myself, and then come back and met my wife 6 months in, so 2 years ended up becoming 11, and during that period I started working in an in-house legal role at the Rugby Football League, which is the governing body, Super League, for rugby league in the UK, and then moved from a legal role to an operational role, and in the end a commercial role, and was the general manager of Super League for 2 years.
And so how long were you in the rugby league for?
So I was in rugby league over there for over 7 years. So I started at the start of 2009 and finished in May 2016 and came straight here. So it was a time of great change in the sport there. There was lots of challenges and also a few opportunities. We ran a great World Cup in 2013, and then 2015 completely restructured the leagues, which was a big sales job, particularly for the general manager of Super League, to convince people that it was the right thing to do. But we had an outstanding year, sold out the grand final for the first time ever at Old Trafford, and a host of other key moments along the way. But then the opportunity to come back home and work at South Sydney was too good to resist.
And so, so coming from that league point of view and to that club point of view, what have been some, other than the roller coaster, which you mentioned in the opener, what are some of the different? Because it's a completely different focus when you're in the league chair or in that league side of things compared to a club. What are some of the differences?
I think in the league side of things, particularly from a commercial point of view, you lock your sponsors away, and then everything kind of rumbles along week in, week out, and then you'll have some spikes where you have major events. And for us, it was the grand final and the Challenge Cup final were the two big events. So for vast times in the year, you were preparing, but there wasn't that week in, week out urgency. Come to Clubland, every week there's a game. You're trying to put bums on seats. You're trying to make sure the members who attend have a great time. You're trying to make sure your merchandise sales are good, your sponsors are happy. So it's a little bit more frenetic week in, week out, as where in the governing body you just have these two massive spikes at the end, or three or four, depending on if you've got international. So that's one of the changes. I think the stakeholder landscape is fairly similar. I think at a governing body you've got lots of stakeholders, but the clubs are really the key stakeholders here. We've got 2 investors and 30,000 members who have an ownership of the club. We've got a junior league that we have a great relationship with. We're trying to build a new high-performance centre, so maintaining good relationships with the federal government, state government and local authority is really important. So that stakeholder landscape is slightly different but just as complex. And I think probably the other difference here is that you've got the on-field team as well. So at the governing body, you don't really have that team to get behind here. You've got 25, 30, 35 players in the first team who are busting their backsides all week to win a game on the weekend, and you kind of ride that with them and ride it when they don't get the result they want. So they're the big changes, and there's some of the similarities as well.
And do you think, as a club CEO that's been on the league side, because there's sometimes that versus mentality between clubs and league that you can potentially see from the league's point of view, and that is different because you've had that experience? Yeah,
absolutely. I think there's times when your first instinct would be to pick up the phone and get stuck into someone at the league head office, or throw your arms around and say, well, why are they doing this for? I think when you've been in head office, it gives you that capacity to reflect and say, well, no, if I was in there, that's kind of what I'd be doing, or I can see why they're doing that because they've got 15 other clubs that they need to keep happy. We're an interesting club here at South in that Peter, who's our FD, was the FD at the NRL. I was the general manager at Super League, and Richo was head of football strategy at the NRL. So our three of our key posts have all spent significant periods of time at head office. So we've got a unique perspective, I think, on the pressures that you have at club land and the opportunities, but also the fact that when you're at head office, you don't go around making decisions just to annoy clubs. It's a really complex balancing act.
But the thing is, your driver is success for South Sydney. So it's as much as you can be empathetic, you're still looking for the best deal for your club, for your fans, for your sponsors, and you've just got to balance that.
That's it. You've got to put the best interests of South Sydney first. But there are times when trying to get a short-term win will stop you getting a long-term result, and you've just got to be balanced about it and understand what are the really important battles to fight.
And another part of the balance side of things, from a CEO point of view, how do you balance, what involvement you have for the on-field success and the off-field success? Like, how does that work for you? How does it work inside for the Rabbitohs?
Yeah, so we're a little bit different in that we've got what we refer to affectionately as the two-headed monster with Richo and I. So Richo is the general manager of football and I'm the CEO. So Richo takes on the burden of responsibility for an organisation of the on-field performance. And I think it's probably something that you'll start to see more and more of in rugby league. It's something that is fairly common in AFL and certainly most American sports, where the way in which the rules and the regulatory landscape for playing and I think also the list management, recruitment, retention, player welfare and wellbeing, it's such a vast landscape now that I'm not sure that you could be a CEO and do that well and also service members, sponsors, match day attendees and sell merchandise well. I just don't think it's possible to sit across both and do them both well. So somewhere along the line, you're going to either have a CEO who's very much football oriented and has a really good chief operating officer or a chief commercial officer who focuses on the rest, or you have what we've got with a CEO who predominantly is commercial based and tries to support Richo and making sure that the football team is resourced well and can perform on the field.
Yeah, so you're looking after the business side of things to make sure it can pay for all the bills on the football side and make it an ongoing entity.
Exactly, and we don't have any gaming revenue. So unlike most AFL or NRL clubs, we don't have a licensed club or a licensed premises attached to us that can write a big check at the end of a year where we make a loss. So again, that gives us an even sharper focus that everything we do has got to have an ROI, that if we are going to invest in something, it's got to have a return to the club, either in terms of winning games or improving the football department or making sure that it's going to grow revenue off the field.
So the Rabbitohs, I've been lucky enough to work with the Rabbitohs for a long while. They've been a leader in the space from a membership point of view. They're one of the first NRL clubs to sort of really jump on that membership bandwagon, like you said, 30,000, strong. You've come into the role with a real strong focus on the business side and the data. Like, why is that a key focus for you?
I think I was really fortunate enough to do a bit of time in the US when I was working at Super League and go and study over there, and then also spend some time with clubs and leagues. And whether we like it or not, the US sporting market tends to be about 5 or 10 years ahead of everyone else. The trends that you see there tend to head to either Europe or Australia and New Zealand. And what I was really impressed by was the way the clubs and leagues were starting to use data to make sure that members got a better experience, that sponsors were either reducing their cost per acquisition or making sure that the engagement they got from their sponsorship was improved, and that actually the match day experience was better. So I came away from those 2 trips to the States with a real focus on it and a feeling that the long-term position, particularly for sponsorship in sports, was it was going to move more and more away from a branding play and more to, they'll be important that your brand's associated with the club, but they'll want to know that if they're sponsoring South Sydney, they're talking to our 170,000 fans and 35,000 members in a way that's relevant for the member and is going to put the best foot forward for the sponsor. So I took an approach, certainly in my last 12 months at Super League and since I've been here, that we needed to invest in our analysis of customer data and data in general, and also the ways in which we could collect it, store it, and then communicate with fans. And
that's the thing. I mean, sports clubs they have data falling out of their pockets as they walk down the street. And you're right. I think, especially in the US focus, it is the growing market segment. When someone says, "Hey, I want to get into sports," I'm like, if you're a data geek and you can analyze that data and come back and say, here's a list of people we can sell more tickets to, and I think the sponsorship side of it is critical. Being able to understand your database better than anybody else is vital. And I think sponsors are becoming more savvy on that side of the equation. There will be more. Hey, we want this much business, and that branding play of we'll put the logo on the side of the stadium, which has been common, in Australia and in the UK with signage rights or jersey rights and those kind of things. It's something that the US system is now starting to explore. We're going to see basketball. We're going to see NBA with patches and on the jerseys and things like that. I think it's sort of going to and fro, but the analysis of the data you've got just to begin with, it just starts showing you what the opportunities are.
It's really interesting because on the field we've been doing it for 5 years, 10 years, and investing more in analysing it and collecting it, and then lots of people interrogating it and testing it.
All the performance tracking stuff and the GPS stuff is coming out of Australia, out of the NRL and the AFL, and now those people are being hired in the US because they're tracking that type of data. So it's we've really focused on the performance side. The opportunity, and that's where the Moneyball movie pretty much came from. Billy Beane tracking all those stats. But the Moneyball on the business side is still sitting there.
It's amazing. Peter Fader, who's a lecturer at Wharton Business School and was fortunate enough to stay there, tells a great story about going to the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference, and he was giving a lecture and someone else was giving a lecture at the same time. His was on yield in MLB stadia, and he said there were about 8 people there, and there was someone else doing something on the draft, and there were 800 people there. So it was just, again, I think reflects that sport sometimes just gets totally focused on the sexy on-field stuff, and that there's a hell of a lot that we can do off the field to improve that's going to make a difference, not only for our business but also for the fans, who at the end of the day are the people that drive the sport.
And I think the thing is also that the tools that weren't available even 3 years ago, the accessibility to them, whether they be the platforms that we've got access to, or the tools to be able to do the slicing and dicing, and you don't need to be a maths genius to be able to get into the data, is super critical.
I think I look back now and almost a bit embarrassed about at Super League we used a couple of organisations to do things that with your help and with some really bright people here we're doing ourselves at a fraction of the cost, and I think that's probably one area where again sometimes sport can be a bit, it sounds really hard, let's not do it, or let's pay a consultant to do it. Well, no, actually let's invest in some people internally who can do this and do it quicker and are in the guts of the business, for want of a better phrase. So we'll know exactly what they need to do and do it quickly. And that's been, I think, one of the things I've really enjoyed in that 13 months is we've got some really bright people here, and almost freeing them up to test things. And
it's a bit like that, Google with its 20% of your work week to work on new projects. Now, that's near impossible to apply in a sports team because everyone, you're always resource stretched. Content teams are always pushing out more content. Ticketing teams, everyone's under the pump, and that roller coaster. It's Monday, we've got to sell tickets for Saturday. It happens, but to be able to free up your staff to at least say, hey, we're going to have a meeting where everyone's going to throw these ideas on the wall because one of them's going to stick.
Yeah.
And we're seeing, in the States, startup incubator types that are happening, alongside the Dodgers, the 76ers, those kind of teams are doing it. But even just having that bit of mentality inside your organisation, you don't know what's going to come out of it.
And also, I think, understand that not everything's going to work, and if it fails, you're better off failing fast and throwing it in the bin, or what did we learn from that? What can we do better? And so I just think that opportunity to test a few things and challenge ourselves and try and get out of the usual grind of play gives press conference, clip a bit of it, put it up.
Yeah.
Because people, I think, increasingly are wanting something a bit more. They want either inner sanctum access across social media that they're not going to get, or they just don't want the usual platitudes in a 24-hour news cycle where, being frank, most of the news organisations are providing them that. They want something different from the club. They don't just want Fox League Light. They want something that is unique to the club and unique to them, particularly as members.
And no one is ever quoting a successful quote that says, that's how we've always done it.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it is. It's right, and it changes so quickly. Things move so quick. I mean, we've got some real opportunities next year when the NRL digital platform changes and it comes back to the ownership of the game. And I think it's hugely exciting, and certainly the team here are excited by it because we want to be at the forefront of that. We want to be testing things and failing fast, or having great success with them. And that's one of the great things about South is that mentality that whether you be on the field and Madge as coach or Richo as general manager of football or over this side of the business, everyone is, well, what can we do better? What have we done that hasn't worked? Why didn't it work? How can we fix it? How can we make it better?
And, so we've been talking about, I guess, digital and data initially, but what other initiatives are you undertaking as CEO? There's talk of, trying to get new facilities. I think I remember coming to the Rabbitohs when I first started and going to the tiny little office that's in Redfern. I'm like, guys, did you really need to have the office look like a rabbit warren? I know it's taking the brand a little bit longer. You're here across the road from Redfern Oval, which seems palatial compared to where you were. Is there plans for that? Yeah,
so we've got a proposal in with the state government at the moment to move our football and administrative side of the business to Heffron Park, which is in Maroubra, which is about 15 to 20 minutes away from where we are in Redfern. We've got federal government funding and local government funding, and we'll also be contributing. Now we're just waiting on the state government to confirm their contribution. They've got a pool of money that will be devoted to the clubs who are bidding from the NRL, New South Wales-based NRL clubs. So that will be somewhere between a $24 and $28 million build out there at Heffron. We're really excited about it. It gives us an opportunity to put everyone in one place. At the moment, there's a Chalmers Street that divides the on-field part of the club from the off-field. We'll all be in one place. It'll be modern. It'll be fit for purpose. At the moment, our football department resides under a grandstand in Redfern, and it was great when it was built in 2009, but 10 years on, you can see it's starting to look its age. And then off the field, we've grown really rapidly over the last 5 years, and we're kind of bursting at the seams here. So we need more room for South Cares to run its groundbreaking community programs. It needs a classroom. It needs space for kids to come and participate in those programs. And then from a commercial and admin side of the business, we need a office that's actually fit for purpose, and also we need facilities, particularly for digital media, that we need a small studio. We need to be able to provide really good content really quickly and do it on site rather than shuffling off somewhere else to do it. Yeah,
and that's talking to Ted Johnson at the Minnesota Timberwolves, and when he was talking about it in the same way that you are, and this is what's going to do, and then touring it a couple of months ago and seeing all of the, there's all the marketing stuff, there's all the commercial stuff, there's all the sales stuff, there's the operations, and then you look out the window and there's the court. And there's the gym, and so it provides a little bit more connectivity to the business and the site itself. It doesn't mean you're sitting there all day looking at them train. And the Crows the same. They've revamped all of their facilities and they're overlooking the gym, which is great, except for the music selection. Sometimes the players push out and you're trying to do work, and there's some AC/DC playing in the background. But again, it sort of brings the club tighter. And then the other part is things like having your own digital studio, a green room, all of those things that help your team go from, we're producing this, to, TV production quality type stuff.
And that's, I think at the moment we have to exhaust a lot of effort in making sure the club stays as one, even though it's separated in terms of buildings. And speaking to a few of the other clubs who've got the same problem, they raise the same issues. It takes a real effort. And if you're all in one place, like the Crows, like the Timberwolves, all of a sudden that effort can be expended on something differently, which is hopefully making the lives of the fans and members and sponsors better. Yeah,
because that's the converse of that is the poor, where the training facility and the business is separated by more than just a street. You can cross the road and yes, all you need today is an umbrella to get across.
Yeah.
But, when you're in LA and you have to go 30 minutes in traffic every time, you're wasting so many staff hours just in travel, whether it's your comm staff or your operations staff backwards and forwards, and it's just not efficient use of everyone's time.
That's it. And people start to resent having to do it as well. I think that having worked in the UK at a business that was split across 2 sites, I think people start to resent the fact they've got to go between them, and you just get less and less return out of your staff over time.
What I'm interested in as a CEO, you've got game day, when it's your home game. What does that entail for you? How much are you checking in on how things are going? How much is it, corporate hand-holding and shaking hands and attending lunches? Like, what are some of the key things you're looking for on a game day?
So I usually do a wander around the concourse before our function starts. Then before the game, I'm usually up in our chairman's suite with most of our corporate partners and some of our invited guests. I'll generally try and watch the first half and see how things are going, and then head downstairs back to the concourse and wander through some of the corporate boxes and just test the feel of the game day from outside the chairman's suite, and then at the end of the game probably finish up in the chairman's suite. I think over time I've actually got better at sitting down and watching the games and enjoying them. I think when I first started I was doing a lot of walking and wandering around and actually found it a bit hard to watch the games. I was almost too nervous, but now I've got to a point where I enjoy sitting down watching it and with some of the directors and some of the fans and sitting there and enjoying us playing well, or when we're not doing so well, supporting the team.
I mean, and it's, I was speaking to a lot of people who are guests or off air, and it's the best bit about working in sports. And sometimes you can forget to take it in and go, I'm watching this game, whether it's a big game or just a regular game. That yes, you still got to be paying attention if there is something in your role from a game day point of view. But one of the drivers people are working in sport is because it's enjoyable and it's their passion, and you've still got to you've got to take that happiness when you can take it, when you can get it.
And that was certainly probably one of the things coming from a governing body where you've got 2-3 events and really you're not as invested in the result. You just want everyone to have a great time, so you don't sit down and cheer for a team. Certainly when I first started at South, I kind of took that approach, and I'd be more interested in what was going on. And then actually after a while I said, no, we're working with these guys all week. We want them to win and we want them to play well. It's important that I watch it and actually, as you said, enjoy it. And so I've started to get a bit better at that, hopefully.
Yeah, well, that's the payoff, because, you're doing all the long hours and you're missing things, and, you're putting in the hard yards, and you're wearing the losses just as hard, so you should be wearing the wins just as well.
And I think the other reason was that last season my daughter and wife stayed back in the UK and joined at the end of the season, and now that my daughter's here, she's just Rabbitoh crazy. So I almost have to watch the game so I can talk with her in the car home, because she just wants to replay the game in the half-hour drive back to Matraville. So I'm almost now forced to watch it, so I've got something to talk to her about on the way home.
No, that's very good. In a CEO's role, you've got to be across different, multiple departments and, stay on top of different parts of the business. How do you do that, as well as try to steer the ship in the right direction from the long term to sort of say, this is best practice over there?
Yeah.
How do you sort of manage that?
I think we're really fortunate here that our senior leadership team is excellent. Shannon and Peter do a great job. We've got some really, really good young leaders who are emerging, and one of the things we focused on this year was an investment in them and creating an emerging leaders program, not only from a succession point of view, which is really important, but actually starting to give them more and more responsibility for the direction of the business, and allowing Shannon, Peter and I to not be writing every decision or making every decision on the day-to-day ins and outs of the business, that we can take a little bit of a step back and, as you say, just drive them in the right area, show them where the best practice is, support them if things aren't going right, and celebrating their successes. So we're nowhere near the finished article yet, but you can see from the start of that program to where we are now over the last 2 or 3 months, that leadership group really growing. And for me now, it's hopefully continues to grow at that pace where they're almost driving the business and we're directing it on where we think it needs to go.
And it's super critical that you're in that space and you let them both grow and drive it, because you just physically can't be dotting every I and crossing every T across all the different things. You have to let your staff perform the role that they're there for.
That's it. I think it's quite common for leaders in lots of cases when they first start out to think that they have to make every decision or that they have to be across every item, but you soon realise that you can't, and actually by the end of it you'll get decision fatigue and start making mistakes.
Yep.
The best thing you can do is try and build capacity and capability underneath you, and we've tried to do that over the last 12 months. As I said, we're nowhere near the finished article, but you can see there's some real growth in the people that are taking on more responsibility within the business, and that the future looks really bright for them. And I sort of keep saying to them, you've got so much talent, so much ability here. Use it to the best you can. Don't feel like you shouldn't say, oh, well, I don't. Trying to move them from we should do this to we're doing this is one of the key things.
And it's again looking at the I guess how the sports world tackles the operation side, the coaching and the football side and the business side. Again, you'll see leadership training and different leadership philosophies and development of leaders all happening on the football side. But, sometimes it's like that's not done as much or as a bigger focus on the business side when it's just as important on that side. 100%.
And we made a conscious decision to use the same leadership coach across both on-field and off-field. So on-field we're creating a very similar group of leaders and then some emerging leaders, and sitting down with Richo and hearing why he wanted to do that sounded very much like why I wanted to do it, and the success that he was having with Gary Dooley as the coach sounded like exactly the sort of input and support we needed. So we decided to do the same thing because it makes sense that way. On-field and off-field are aligned. Yeah, some of the issues and some of the pressures might be a little bit different, but there's the same philosophy across building leadership capability.
Yeah, and again, because they're using the same, it builds that connectedness to the playing group, and hey, we're all on the they're setting their values and they're aligned with your values, and that's why people are getting selected and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And I think also that what the business wants to see in its leaders, be they on field or off field, what are those traits and what characteristics will be the same across both.
Yep. Recently, athlete welfare was in the news. Greg Inglis, put his hand up for help, seeking help with depression. Same with Alex Fasolo in the AFL. How does the club either deal with that news, but then also look to provide support to players as the pressure just seems to mount year on year and seems to be growing all the time?
It is, and I think it's a hugely courageous decision by Greg and by Alex to stick their hand up and say that they've got depression, they need treatment. Really comforting that in 95% of the cases the response has been hugely supportive across both sports. I think it shows you where we've come from in the last 15 years.
Yep.
We've devoted a fair bit of resource and attention to wellbeing and education. Again, we're not perfect yet, but we see that as a real opportunity to improve the club, improve the playing group, make it even a tool when it comes to recruitment and retention. If we can be seen to be the best club for that'll help us recruit and retain players. From a personal point of view, it's interesting to having sat through 2 days with the Players Association in discussions on the CBA. It's almost universal in terms of the desire to make sure that these situations are treated appropriately, that there's a safety net there for players who are suffering from mental illness or feeling like they have too much pressure in their life. And almost hopefully my view is that with Greg and Alex and their courage, it becomes easier for players to stick their hand up, because I think we've gone from a point where players didn't feel comfortable doing that to some players now feeling comfortable. We've got to get to a point where everyone feels comfortable doing it, and that there's no stigma whatsoever, or there shouldn't be any embarrassment with it at all, and that when a player does put their hand up, they've got access to exactly the right level of support and exactly the right facility or specialist treatment, because like every injury or illness, the sooner we can identify it, the better treatment we can give, the better the recovery. And my view is we should be treating it exactly like you would treat any other illness or injury amongst a player.
Yeah, and I think
make the best result.
And I agree. GI, very brave. Alex the same, putting their hand up. Knowing that the media scrutiny is there, but then to change, the narrative has changed a little bit, and the conversation has changed. A lot, at least in Australia, around the discussion, which is good, because then the next guy, and that will happen because the pressures are there, and it doesn't have to be putting their hand up and say this is right. It could just be I'm overwhelmed. How do I deal with it? I get anxious before big games. How do I deal with it? And all of those things that they can be more comfortable in, they don't have to go and have a press conference about it, but more comfortable in the club environment to have that conversation, knowing that, no one's putting a black mark or putting something against their name to say, oh, this is a problem, because it's just, they have no problem saying my hamstring is sore or my knee, and it's exactly the same.
That's it. And I think too, particularly with rugby league and also with AFL, a lot of athletes that make it to the top come from pretty tough upbringings and tough areas, and in some ways they're ill-equipped for the pressures that come with fame and professional sports. And we can educate as much as we possibly can, but there's still an element that some of this is unforeseen. Players are going into environments where they've grown up not expecting it to be like it is, and it is, and it's really hard. And they've got the pressures of being great athletes, and they've got the pressures of being role models off the pitch, and generally they've got pressures around, like all of us do, about being family men as well. So how you balance that is enormously difficult, and it's encouraging that players are starting to identify that this is extremely difficult situations to balance, and that there is no shame or no embarrassment in putting your hand up. And in fact, it's encouraged, because that's the only way we're going to make players' lives better. Yeah,
and that's it was a study recently. Laura Hale did a study on NBA players and their activities of tweeting and when they tweeted, and on their sleeping patterns and things like that. And again, drawing the correlation that late night tweeting and interaction meant they slept less and they had poorer performance the next day, which is one thing. But then the other thing is she's not taking into consideration what they have to read at 1 o'clock in the morning. And as someone who helped get athletes on board on social and things like that, now when someone says, "Oh, should I be on Twitter?" I'm like, there's not that big of an upside, because you open it up, and 95% of it will be, "Oh, you missed this kick," or "You're no good," and it's just, there's no good part of it from a mental wellness point of view.
I thought Alistair Clarkson's comments last week were extremely accurate, but also great that there's coaches out there who are now starting to understand that social media is a little bit more nuanced than don't do it or yes do it, that there are platforms, some platforms are better than others for athletes to be on. Most of these athletes have got friends and family the same age who will be using it, and it's important therefore that they have access to it. But trying to balance that access with maintaining their ego when things go bad or things go great is immensely difficult. And again, they're not really equipped for that.
No.
Their mate who they've grown up with, probably he's got 10 followers and doesn't care, but these guys have got a very different life. So it's something that we have to be really careful of. I'm sure education will follow and we'll get better at it. But you're right. What's the upside in some athletes being on Twitter? There probably isn't one.
No, and the thing is, I still use the advice of former Manly George Rose when he was early on social, and he said, I don't tweet after midnight, I don't post. I said, why? He goes, I don't trust myself.
Yep.
Right, and so it was his own self-imposed rule, whether he's, and it wasn't that he was doing anything. He's just like, after 12, I'm tired. And we've seen with, the leader of the free world tweeting things at 1 o'clock in the morning, how that goes.
Doesn't end well. And,
so, it's good advice. And the same is, you don't have to open it.
And that's it. It is about boundaries, isn't it? I think that's sometimes it's so easy to slip into the habit of, I'll check it at 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning and trying to set those boundaries for people when they can use it, when they can't. I know there's some discussion around, well, certainly at our place and most training environments, when can you have your phone?
Yep.
When can you have access to this, and how big a distraction is it if you've got it all the time, or do you make it a totally phone-free zone, which I know some clubs have trialled and had some success with. So trying to find that balance and the boundaries is really important.
Oh yeah, completely, and it's for the athlete to take that control back, And I think I think it was Serena Williams said, she's using Snapchat more often because one, she's using it with her friends in messaging and things like that, but because people can't message her, they can only message her if she allows them to.
Yep.
It's becoming a broadcast platform, so it's working for her, but she's not having to deal with the constant updates on what she should be doing with her backhand. She shouldn't be having a baby because she's playing tennis, and all these things, silly things that people will be coming and saying, no doubt saying all the time, that she goes, I don't need that in my life. And so, that's the always a concern, because there's no way people say, football's used to it. They get it for 25 weeks of the year, so they get used to it, and it's not, because you see what happens at Olympics and things like that when an athlete who's never had 6 months of it to get accustomed to it gets it all in 3 days.
And it's just, at the end of the day, they yes, they're professional sports people, but they're people as well at heart, And even the roughest, toughest coaches and players I've seen struggle with that, a bad performance or a bad set of games, and all of a sudden on social media, because there's that immediacy and interaction, they're just getting it, and it's not right.
Yeah, and it's a classic one of, you wouldn't say it to their face, but that's why the internet exists.
Sit behind, yeah.
So thank you very much for coming on the show. I'll finish off with the closing five.
Sure.
Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
It would have been at Redfern Oval. I can't remember the game, but we grew up on the Central Coast, and so we didn't really have sporting events on the Central Coast. But my dad's sister lived in Redfern and was a mad Rabbitohs fan, so we used to come down every now and again on a Sunday and take it to a game at Redfern Oval.
Terrific. And is there a favourite food memory or a go-to food that you go to at a sports event?
I can remember having some nachos at a Philadelphia 76ers game a couple of years ago that I thought was outstanding. It was probably the most unhealthy piece of food you could ever buy at a stadium.
Has that orange cheese sauce all over the top of it.
It had the orange cheese sauce. I think it was washed down with a cold beer as well. So, but it was, and part of it was probably the event as well. It was nice to be there and enjoy something different.
What's the first app you open in the morning?
Having said all those things about Twitter, it's actually Twitter because I find the benefit in Twitter is almost a breaking news website, and that having come from the UK, my Twitter feed is 50% UK Europe based and 50% Australian based, so it's an ideal way to catch up on what's just happened in the UK during the day.
You catch up on Europe in the morning.
In the morning, and then Australia in the evening.
Would you have someone that the podcast listeners should follow or check out?
I like obviously following Peter Fader on Twitter, who's an outstanding data-driven marketing professor, and then also the RedF, or RedF, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but I find their newsletters just amazing. And the only difficulty is they come through about 9 o'clock at night in Australia, because it's a US-based publication. You spend another 2 hours reading it, so it's a fantastic publication.
No, it is good because you can get the sports mix or the political mix, and
I tend to just try and restrict myself to the sports and the media section.
Yeah. Oh, I'm in the sports section and the tech.
Yes.
So sort of see what's happening in that space.
Their coverage of the recent issues at ESPN and the staff layoffs has been amazing. I think for one newsletter to give it so much in depth analysis, all sides of the argument, was amazing.
Yep. And if you were to pick a social media platform as your MVP, what would it be? And this is I now give people the alternate ending to this, you can pick your personal MVP and you can pick it from a club point of view, so you can have two answers.
I would say Facebook.
Yeah.
I think I'm probably a little bit too old for Twitter and Snapchat. I love being on those platforms, but I wouldn't say my use of them is brilliant. And I find Twitter just a little bit too. I think there's probably just too many people out there on Twitter who are abusive or obnoxious.
It's a noise thing. There's so much noise now on Twitter that it
detracts from the platform. As where Facebook, I still find most of my friends are on there. Most of the things I want to find out about are on there, and that will be the one I go to the most.
Yeah, it's definitely one where you just lean into the algorithm and you find out about the appropriate baby news and the articles that you're meant to be reading are there. And if you train it will keep sending you the same stuff.
Exactly. All the information about my friends that I should have told my wife 2 weeks ago, I can find out and then tell her. So that's how I usually use it.
Terrific. Where can people find you on the internet if they want to send you a tweet or?
I don't even know my at Blake Solly, I think, is the handle.
It is.
The Twitter. Good. I forgot. It probably shows you how often I'm posting. But at Blake Solly for Twitter. I can't even remember my Instagram.
I think you're Blake Solly on Instagram as well. Yeah.
One of the great things about having the name Blake Solly is that there's not too many of us around, so it's a fairly simple way of putting a handle together.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, and best of luck for the rest of the season for the Rabbitohs.
Thank you, Sean, and thanks for having me on, and thanks for all your support for the club.
Cheers.
Sign up for Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/sign up now.
Thanks again to Blake Solly. You can send him a tweet, Blake Solly, SOLLY, on Twitter. If you've got any questions about running a team, what it's like being in clubland or in league land, as he spoke there, he's sort of been on both sides of that fence. And also thank you to also him talking, quite openly about what a topic that is a big topic here in Australia, and it is one that is growing in world sport is around depression and the support that athletes need and the pressures that are on them. And it's not restricted to athletes. I know, I'm very thankful of the support that I receive in real life and in the digital support that I get from people who listen to the podcast or clients, because everyone will have those down times. So I think one of the good things that come out of stories like Greg Inglis and Alex Vasolo is that more people can put their hand up and say, I need some help. And I know I've done that in the past, and it's made for a healthier me, and also helped me stay on top of all the things that I'm trying to do. So don't feel afraid to put your hand up and say you need help, because funnily enough, the people around you are more than willing to give you that help, and there's no slight on you personally or what you're trying to do as a result. And so I think more stories like Greg and Alex's will only be better for everyone. And so it won't just be a benefit that is in the sporting world that is slowly learning, but just the wider community. So to wrap up this 150th episode, if you need my help, if you please reach out, send me an email, Sean@SportsGeekHQ, send me a tweet, at Sean Callanan, message me on the SportsBiz Slack, which there's every chance it's milestone week. There's every chance we'll be crashing past the 1,000 SportsBiz Slack users. Again, if you work in sports business, you're more than welcome to come in. Some really good discussions happening there. Just go to sportsgeekhq.com/Slack to join up. And then the other part of it is, I guess, the business, what I'm doing when I'm not recording podcasts and doing interviews, which is helping teams drive success around digital and commercial efforts. And I'm doing more and more of that stuff with the commercial and sponsorship teams in helping them better understand how to sell digital, better understand how to deliver the actions that sponsors and partners want. And it's pretty much the reason that I've started the partnership with Tradable Bits under the Sports Geek Campaigns banner. You can go to sportsgeekcampaigns.com to check it out and register interest, or you can just straight up send me an email. The main objective of Sports Geek Campaigns is to help sports teams drive more profits out of every campaign that they do. It is a highly undervalued piece of the digital puzzle, and it helps you push the valuation aspect of what you're doing from a digital point of view, whether it be as simple as an Instagram post to a fully fledged integrated campaign that is integrated with your game day. So there's some real opportunities there. I'm really excited about the work and the conversations that are coming out of it, talking to both people on the digital side and commercial side. So I'd love your feedback. It is a work in progress. So go to sportsgeekcampaigns.com. Let us know what you think. Reach out to me. Tell me what your problems are, because that's all I've been doing at Sports Geek over the last now 8 years, is helping solve problems in the sports digital marketing and commercialization space. So going to continue to do so. How many episodes more of the podcast there will be, that's to be decided. I keep hitting milestones like 150 episodes, 200,000 downloads. It's terribly motivating. And to get emails and have conversations with people like Michael, who gave me a call from Canada last week, saying he's been listening to the podcast. Thank you very much, Michael. I'm more than happy to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to talk to someone who's super pumped because they've been listening to the podcast. So, again, thank you very much for the support from the 150 episodes. All the guests, as I said earlier, all the teams, all of my team they're involved, James and Meg and Jolie, and not forgetting DJ Joel. You do a tremendous job each week in, week out. Say the same stuff. You've done a terrific job. So until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek, and you've been listening to the Sports Geek podcast.
Like the Sports Geek podcast? Find us on facebook.com/sportsgeek. Check out which teams work with Sports Geek at sportsgeekhq.com/clients. Please leave a review on iTunes. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes. Thanks for listening to the Sports Geek podcast.